The old clock in the living room never stopped ticking, even when the house was silent, even when the words stopped coming between father and son. Ethan grew up in that sound. Every tick meant a rule. Every talk meant another reminder. His father, Richard Hayes, believed time was the only currency a man should never waste. He woke at 5 every morning, read the paper in silence, and left for work before the sun reached the kitchen window. He never said goodbye, only lock the door when I'm gone. Ethan used to wait at the top of the stairs, watching his father's back disappear down the walkway. When he was younger, he thought the man looked like a soldier marching toward duty. As he got older, he realized it wasn't duty, it was distance. They rarely spoke without tension. Every word seemed measured, heavy. Ethan wanted freedom, Richard wanted discipline. At 16, Ethan started keeping his own time. He stopped joining his father at breakfast. He stayed out later, missed dinner, ignored the house rules about curfews. His father would sit in the armchair, waiting, eyes fixed on the door clock. When Ethan came in late one night, the clock struck 1 a.m. sharp. His father stood up, his face calm but eyes cold. "You think the world waits for you?" he asked quietly. Ethan shrugged. "I'm not you, Dad." "No," Richard said, "but someday you'll wish you were half as reliable." That night ended with slammed doors. For days, neither spoke. On a cold December morning, the silence broke. Ethan was getting ready for school when his father entered his room, not knocking, just standing there like the air had given him permission. "You're skipping practice again," he said. "I'm tired," Ethan muttered. "You're lazy. Or maybe I just don't want to live like you." His father stared at him, not angry, not surprised, just disappointed, in that quiet way that hurts more than shouting. "You think responsibility is punishment, but one day you'll learn it's protection." Ethan didn't reply. He just turned up his headphones and let the music drown the ticking clock. That Sunday, Ethan's grandmother came over, the only person who could melt the walls between them. She was small, soft-spoken, and full of stories about when your father used to smile. She brought a photo album that morning. Ethan sat beside her as she opened old pages. Richard as a young man, laughing with his parents, fishing with his brother, smiling with Ethan as a baby in his arms. "That one," she said, pointing to the photo of baby Ethan asleep on his father's chest. "He didn't sleep for 3 nights until you stopped crying. He said, 'You'll hold him till he knows he's safe.'" Ethan blinked. "He said that?" She smiled. "He just doesn't say things out loud anymore, but he feels more than he shows." Later that night, Ethan stood by his father's office door, watching through the gap. The man was sitting there, eyes on an old family clock, the same one that had been ticking since before Ethan was born. The man wasn't reading or writing, just staring at it, lost. For a second, he saw something in him that wasn't control. It was loneliness. A week later, things fell apart. Richard collapsed at work. A heart episode, the doctors called it, not fatal, but serious enough to demand rest, something he'd never learned how to do. Ethan sat beside his hospital bed that night, watching his father sleep for the first time in years. No clock in the room, just quiet, just breathing. When Richard woke, his voice was hoarse. "Missed your classes?" "I'll catch up," Ethan said. "Time doesn't wait," Richard whispered weakly. Ethan shook his head. "Then maybe it's time to stop chasing it." The man almost smiled. For the first time, there was no lecture, no lesson, just silence and understanding. But what Ethan didn't realize that night was that his father's lesson was only beginning. The house felt emptier after his father came home from the hospital. The ticking clock still hung in the living room, but now it sounded softer, slower, almost human. Richard had to retire early. The doctors warned against stress, long hours, and emotional strain, basically everything he'd built his life around. For a man who only understood structure, rest felt like exile. He spent his days reading old letters, fixing small things around the house, and sitting on the porch watching traffic. Ethan started joining him, not because he was told to, but because it felt wrong to leave him alone. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they didn't. Silence between them began to mean something different. Not tension, but peace. One evening, Richard held out something small in his hand, an old silver pocket watch. The surface was worn, the glass scratched. "This was your grandfather's," he said. "He gave it to me the day I left for college. Said, 'Time doesn't belong to you until you decide how to use it.'" Ethan ran his thumb along the dented edge. "You want me to have it?" Richard nodded. "You'll waste it at first. Everyone does. But when you stop trying to outrun time, you'll start to understand family." Ethan looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time saw not a strict man, but a scared one. A man who had spent years trying to protect what little he had left of family by holding it too tightly. Weeks passed. Ethan started spending more time at home. They cooked together. Badly. They fixed the old clock. Almost. They laughed. Awkwardly, but it was the start. Every day, Ethan saw something new in his father. Small habits. How he still lined up his shoes perfectly. How he brewed his coffee with exact water level. How he always left one extra plate on the table. For the mother Ethan had lost when he was 10. He understood now. The strictness wasn't cruelty. It was grief, disguised as control. One evening, Ethan came home late again, but this time it wasn't rebellion. He'd been working part-time at the mechanic's shop to help pay bills. He found his father asleep on the couch, the watch still in his hand, ticking softly. Ethan smiled, gently took it, and set it on the table. "Time's safe, Dad," he whispered. Richard opened his eyes slowly. "You sound like your mother." That was the first time he'd said her name in years, and for once, Ethan didn't know what to say. He just sat down beside him. Months later, the old man passed peacefully. No pain, no alarms. Just quiet. The clock in the living room stopped that same night at 11:47 p.m. He didn't fix it. He left it as it was. At the funeral, he didn't speak much, but when people asked about his father, he said, "He taught me that time doesn't make family stronger. Love does. Time only shows you how long it takes to understand that." Years later, Ethan stood in the same house, older now, a son of his own sitting beside him. The pocket watch still worked. The clock on the wall was still silent. His little boy asked, "Dad, why do you keep a broken clock?" He smiled faintly. "Because it stopped the night I realized what time really means." The boy tilted his head. "What does it mean?" He looked at him softly. "It means the people you love, that's where every second really goes." That night, he tucked the pocket watch beside his son's bed. The ticking filled the room, steady, gentle, alive again. And for the first time since his father's passing, Ethan felt like the lesson was complete. The clock no longer measured time. It measured love.